Special thanks to our promotional partners at the American Philatelic Society.
The APS is the largest stamp collecting organization in the world, supporting collectors of any level worldwide.
For more information about membership and APS services, visit stamps.org.
Hi, I'm Michael Cortese of Noble Spirit in Pittsfield, New Hampshire.
And I'm Charles Epting of H.R. Harmer in New York City.
And this is Conversations with Philatelists. Now, Charles, this time we thought we'd do something a little different.
Yeah, but it sort of ties into something that we've kicked around a bit amongst ourselves for the last couple of months, where, there's so many other great hobbies out there and so many that I've sort of dabbled in throughout the course of my life. I'm sure you have as well. And we wanted to reach out to people and see what are the similarities and differences between ourselves and some other people. And coincidentally,
we got beat to the punch.
We did, exactly. That's what happens when we talk about something this long.
Yeah.
But we were contacted by Kent and Amit from Cardboard Culture.
Yeah,
who run a sort of started similar time frame to ours. They started a baseball card podcast, a trading card podcast.
Right.
And looking back through the list of guests, they've been great about reaching out to people, whether it's a Star Wars autograph collector or traditional baseball card collectors or people who just specialize in one tiny facet of the trading card hobby. They've been great about branching out and incorporating all sorts of people. So we were really excited when they reached out to us, and last night we were on their live stream. I think they'd hoped to have us for an hour.
Yeah.
And they got stuck with 2.5 hours of us.
2.5 hours, yeah.
So we are going to do something different this week. Why don't you explain what listeners can expect?
So we want to, it was a fantastic conversation. It was a great conversation for people who are kind of just getting started in the hobby. They were really trying to find out what stamp collecting, what philately is about. So what we're going to do now is we're going to show you the first 47 and a half minutes, natural break in conversation. First 47 minutes of the interview where we just talk to Kent and Amit. And then if you're interested in the rest, please go over to their channel. We'll have links in the description. We'll have links to their Twitter. They also have audio podcast on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We will also put links in the description for that to continue to listen to the rest of the
don't just listen
interview.
to us. Actually, don't listen to us at all. Listen to all of their other wonderful guests they've had. It would be my recommendation. So I really enjoyed talking to them last night, and let's hand it over to Cardboard Culture.
Yeah. So welcome everybody to episode number 31. For tonight, we're honored to have, and that's right, not just one but two. The gentlemen we're about to introduce to you tonight are what is known as philatelists. What is a philatelist? It's one who collects and or studies stamps. Yes, so we'll be talking about the world of stamp collecting, the synergies of stamp collecting and card collecting. So please welcome the hosts of the YouTube channel Conversationists with Philatelists, Michael Cortez and Charles Epting, to the show.
Hey guys.
Hi.
Hey.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much for having us.
No, thank you for being here.
And I'd like to mention that they're very well dressed. So just make sure, that's a good representation of that end of the hobby, and we're wearing T-shirts, so you can just see where we stack.
So, gentlemen, can you give can both of you give us a little introduction as to how philately started for each of you? When did it all start, and what is it about stamp collecting that keeps you hooked to this day? So, one of you take to start.
Michael, I'll turn it over to you first.
All right.
Sure. Yeah. My introduction to the hobby started around 8 years old with my father, third generation philatelist. When he started me in the hobby, he wasn't just a philatelist himself. He was a stamp dealer as well. So he would go out and buy collections either privately or from auction houses, and then repackage them and ship them to other auction houses or sell them to other collectors privately. So I kind of got into the hobby at a young age on more of the pricing material, selling material style. So he would have me price items, find items, obviously not at 8 years old, but then as I got older, high school, college, things like that, I would start buying collections with him, and he would bring me into the hobby to show me the passion that other collectors have and kind of what we can do to help other people find their collections.
So I had a lot more sort of circuitous route to the hobby than Michael. Michael was sort of born into it and raised with it, and didn't have much of a chance, I guess you could say. I was born with the collector gene. So growing up, it was baseball cards, it was fossils, it was Legos, it was books, it was everything really except for stamps, even a little bit of coin collecting, but stamps just never caught my interest. I don't know why, but it just wasn't a part of my makeup. Until I got to college. I was at the University of Southern California, was looking for some sort of hobby that would help keep me busy, something that initially would be affordable and small, which very quickly I realized that stamp collecting stops being affordable and small at a very fast pace. But really for me, it just started as a way to pass the time. I was studying sort of the cultural history of the 1920s and 30s, and I just got to thinking, what were stamps like back then? So I started buying them on eBay. You can buy, a couple of stamps for, 100 stamps for $1 or whatever. And I just started doing that, just amassing more and more stamps and putting them into my album. And from there, it just sort of grew into more and more a part of my life until I was presented with the opportunity to, make it a full-time career, which was not the path I was planning on taking in life. But, you sort of reach these crossroads and you can't say no to certain opportunities. And I've only been collecting stamps for probably about 7 years now. And I've been in the business for 5 of those years. So it's all been sort of very, very rapid since I discovered my love of this hobby.
You did hit on one thing. They are small.
They are. The problem is you can get a lot of them really easily. And then you end up with banker's boxes full of stamps and albums full of stamps. And they're sort of deceptive in that way. Exactly that, but just really tiny, much smaller and thinner than the cards.
So when it comes to stamp collecting for both of you, so what is it about the stamps? Is it like the picture, the story? Like what is it that makes you still be interested in the hobby right now?
For me, when I started out, it was all about the design. I was really drawn to some of the more classic Newfoundland, some of the French issues, Canada. The designs that they put on these stamps were just absolutely breathtaking. Some of the French colonies from the 20s, 30s, 40s, they were just gorgeous. But now as I grow into the hobby more, it's definitely the stories. It's definitely the more of the postal history, more of the journeys that the covers go on, the history behind the scarce issues themselves. So what draws you in is the eye appeal, and then I feel like what hooks you, what gets you is the stories.
I feel like I'm just gonna take an opposing. So for me early on, because I was collecting mostly American stamps, common stuff from the early 20th century. And the designs are nice, that's Teddy Roosevelt or that's Martha Washington. They're fine. They're kind of your standard, bread and butter presidents and founding fathers and things. For me, it was just the thought that, again, I was studying the 20s and 30s very heavily. So the thought that Franklin Roosevelt could have used this stamp, or F. Scott Fitzgerald could have used this stamp,
yes.
and even if even your everyday person, your average boy or girl in the 1920s, this is what they would have licked and stuck on a letter. Who knows what that letter may have contained? For me, it was just very evocative that somebody a century ago, used this. And, coins are neat, and you can certainly imagine coins changing hands. But stamps, the fact that by using them, you sort of necessarily have to destroy them. You have to just obliterate them with ink. I think
right.
That's interesting as well. Like you can prove that it did its job. You can prove that it served its purpose. So that was really fun for me. And that was how I got into it. Of course, the artistry, the stories behind the stamps is always really interesting too, how stamps have been used for propaganda by different governments and how stamps have, it's sort of the social connotations behind stamps, I think, are very interesting as well. Nowadays, most people are used to, going to the post office and they get a flag stamp and they don't really think much about it. Maybe they go buy the new Star Wars or Harry Potter stamps, but stamps used to have a lot more cultural gravity, I feel, and who did and didn't make it on a stamp really told you a lot about who was in power. And I think that part of the story is really interesting as well.
That's true. That's very, very true.
I think we sort of take the designs for granted today. Yeah, it's just a flag.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way in terms of the social political theater in terms of using stamps, but that is very true. And going back to what Michael said, it's very his answer has a lot of similarities to card collecting. No, I mean,
Oh, very much so. And the opposing views aren't so opposing. They work in synergy with each other.
I feel like we just sort of we've gone like backwards on everything. I feel like Michael started on the dealer side and then became a collector, and I flipped. We're just I guess complementary in that regard.
It's almost like the whole idealist and realist. So I'm the idealist, Kent's the realist. So it's the same thing within your world too.
So, gentlemen, not too long ago during the last week in July, the National Sports Collectors Convention, which is very well known for us card collectors, was held at the Donald E. Stevens Convention Center in Chicago. Interestingly enough, you both just recently attended the Great American Stamp Show in Chicago at the same venue that ran from August 12th to the 15th. What was that like for the both of you, and how was the turnout for it?
So, and I mentioned when we spoke briefly last night, I went to the National in 2000 when it was in Anaheim. So that was my last real card show. And I didn't realize that we just missed it. Had I known, I would have maybe tried to go in a week early or something to catch that for a day. But this was a big deal for us because, like most hobbies, I'm sure card collecting is the same. There's been this real lack of in-person interaction for the last year and a half. There's been a lot of Zoom meetings. That's why Michael and I started our podcast, was just to catch up with people during the pandemic, but no amount of that can replace shaking someone's hand or digging through a box of envelopes or that sort of thing. So there was a show in San Francisco 2 weekends before that was sort of the appetizer before the big, Great American Stamp Show put on by the American Philatelic Society is the big annual national show. And 2020's edition was virtual and it was fun. But it really felt like we were back. It was sort of the first time since March of 2020, I guess, that I felt at home again. I felt like our world had sort of returned to normal, taking all proper precautions and whatnot, not being reckless by any means, but it felt like we were back.
Yeah. The show before that was Nebraska in 2019, and attendance-wise, I feel like it was almost similar.
It was neck, I would say.
Yeah,
I
really
was. There's been a lot of pent-up demand for something like this. Chicago's a great central location. It's easy to get to from everywhere. And it was a lot of fun to be back.
Yeah.
Great. For those of us in our audience who are not familiar with stamp shows, when you're at a stamp show, what does one do? For example, is it similar to sports card collecting shows where there's a lot of buying and trading that gets done on the show floor?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different ones. You can start out with just the basic Bourse show, where it's just regular dealers with their stock inventory. You go and you just buy there. There may be like a little kids booth or an activity booth that you can go to, but these much larger shows like the one in Chicago, there's an auction going at the same time. There's all these exhibits. They had how many exhibits? 800 frames of exhibits?
There were 1,000 frames. Yeah,
1,000 frames of exhibits.
Exhibiting, and I hope we can talk about that more because I feel like that's a piece of the hobby that people outside of the hobby don't really know about. The fact that there's competitive stamp collecting.
Yeah.
And people spend their entire lives and their entire fortunes trying
thousands and thousands of dollars.
Exactly. Trying to, collect all the right pieces to tell a story. And then there's accredited judges, both on a national and international level. It's almost like, I feel like it's the IOC versus like the NFL. Like you've got the national circuit and then you can sort of graduate and go to the Olympics or something. And people take their competitive stamp collecting and exhibiting very seriously. Of course, there's all sorts of, behind the scenes politics and, just like with any competitive league. That's one part of a stamp show. Again, you've got the dealers you can go buy, but Michael, I didn't mean to interrupt.
It's a huge part.
Part of it is just fascinating.
Yeah, you were talking about people going all over the place. I mean, I was talking to one gentleman after hours about he'd won a large gold, and I was asking him what he was going to do and what this meant for him now. And he said, "Oh, this is fantastic. I'm going to London. I'm going to Cape of Good Hope. I'm going to Munich. And he's got to go to all these different places to exhibit his stamp collection so that he can try and win this massive international award. But he's got to show it at all these different. It was phenomenal. And it's just, yeah.
Can you kind of explain to our audience what the large gold is?
Charles, you might know a bit more about that one.
So when you show your exhibit, and basically what an exhibit is, there's what are called frames, which are picture a big
Okay.
sort of 8-frame picture frame sort of thing where you can fit 16 regular letter size pages in it.
Okay.
So so you tell your story sort of in units of 16 pages, all the way up to 10 frames, which would be 160 pages worth of material.
Wow.
And the accredited judges go through and they look for certain things. What's the importance of your collection? What's the presentation like? How rare is your material? And they give you points on a scale of 1 to 100. And there's different metal levels. So it goes from silver to large silver to vermeil to large vermeil to gold to large gold, which is the crowning achievement. That's like a gold medal at the Olympics. If your stamp exhibit gets a large gold, that's the cream of the crop.
So I guess in our world, we don't have anything like to that level, but besides bragging rights, we do have that. But there is a subset of collectors who are PSA collectors, or PSA is professional sports authenticators. They slab the cards in those rigid plastics, and they give you a grade. And some of the PSA guys, they're part of this PSA set registry, and you get awarded if you are the best. You have the best registry of a particular issue. So we have that. However, it's a bit amazed at how global this is, because stamp collecting is a global phenomenon. Trading cards is mostly an American, Canadian, North American phenomenon. It's just starting to reach the global stage. I had a kind of comical thought. I don't know why, but it's like it has the very similar circuit like the dog show.
Absolutely.
Dog show. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the same. Yeah.
I was talking. Have you guys seen the movie Best in Show?
Yes.
Okay, so I was talking to a friend of mine who's in the stamp hobby, and he said his dream is a movie about stamp shows like Best in Show. Sort of a loving sort of mockumentary about the world, because there are so many similarities to the dog show world. A lot of these hobbies, there's a lot of the same blood that comes from the same place. So I think that's a very apt analogy.
Because it draws in people who might not necessarily go to a show otherwise. People have their own
that's
circles,
true. Yeah,
and
right.
if visiting the bourse is nice. A lot of the auctions is nice, but you can do some of the bidding online now. But if they didn't have these exhibits to go to, if they didn't need to win these awards, it's bringing in people who have these kind of collections to the show now to just specifically exhibit, to specifically try and win these awards, who might not have attended the show in the first place because they can do it via phone bid. Or
it allows also for the museum traveling roadshow / museum aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
it's a good way. So one of the things that collectibles in general struggle with, and I think all collectibles have this, is to have their niche group. So there's a very niche core group that love everything about stamps or everything about trading cards. Then you get the periphery. So you're like, the periphery is like, I don't quite get it. There's nothing really in it for me. And then when you have a museum aspect, like, oh, okay, I'll go check it out. And all you need is, if you take digital, for example, you need a 2% conversion rate. So if 100 people go and 2% of people convert and turn into collectors, then you've won, right?
Absolutely.
You're growing the hobby. So
yeah.
Anyway,
Sorry,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say the last thing I'll say about exhibiting too, just to tie it back to sports really quick. The American circuit is called the World Series of Philately. So
Interesting.
there's about 30 some odd shows throughout America every year that are WSP qualifying shows, and then every year there's the Champion of Champions, where the winners of all 30 of those shows go head to head. So the way people sort of, figure out, I'm going to try and win in Sarasota or Seattle or Portland, because all you need to do is notch a victory at one of those shows to make it to the Champion of Champions. But I think that terminology, World Series, is funny how they draw from, professional sports to
right.
There's
to
that.
advertise this stuff. It adds to the pomp and circumstance of the whole thing.
Well, that works because the World Series, and you also mentioned a soccer reference or football reference, the Champions League. So there's a Champions League in football where, soccer, American. Now I'm forgetting which one to call it.
Now you're speaking Michael's language, by the way.
Yeah. So going down that whole way of thought, there's a lot of synergies in terms of like the trade-offs between the way we think of the thing. Already in the first 18 minutes we've chatted, we've gone down many different tributaries of thought. So this is awesome. And what we want the crowd who do watch us now and live and after is, we're not that different. We're all kind of the same. We have our own venue and our own vehicle to do the collection, but we all our quirks and the competitiveness and fires are all there. Anyway, sorry, I lost track of where we are with our questions. Kent.
You're next. The story. We're curious to know your story.
Oh, right. Sorry. So when I get guests are good when I've forgotten the questions and so. All right, so I'll reset here. First of all, before we go there, I want to say hi to Dennis.
Oh, yes. Hey, Dennis. Thanks for coming by.
Dennis checks out all our shows regularly. Thank you for coming. And we have Name, who's Indigenous rookie card collector. So for Michael and Charles, he collects only rookie cards of NHL players of Indigenous descent.
Wow.
So he's fairly well known for that.
I love the specialization. I'm used to people just trying to complete a set. You have to get the whole top set or whatever. But the fact that again, the black hockey players and the Indigenous, I think that's fascinating that people find their own little niche. It's amazing.
Yeah, and that's what we want to show. There's more than just what's the word I'm gonna look for? The pop culture aspect. There's other not so pop culture aspects of life with collecting. All right, so back to the question. Make sure I stay on track here. So we're curious to know your story. As the two of you decided to collaborate and do a show, and you're here today, and your show is quite popular. What led you to create your channel? How did you two meet? Tell us all about it.
So we met. Our meeting story, our origin story, is kind of long-winded. There's a group within the larger organization in America called the American Philatelic Society. And there was a small group within that led by a gentleman named Alex Hyman called the Young Philatelic Leaders Fellowship. So we were both members of that fellowship. We applied, and I believe you have to be under 28 years old and over 18. So over 18, under 28, we both applied, and we were 1 year after the other. I was 2013, he was 2014, and they send you to different shows. So my first show was in Milwaukee. Charles's first show was in Hartford, Connecticut. And we kind of started down the organized philately path that way.
Young people might not have the resources to go to stamp shows or get to know the right people. So it's a great program they have where they sort of foot the bill for all of your travel and make those introductions. And I know it's what kept.
Oh, wait, they actually foot the bill?
They do.
Yes.
They get very generous sponsors who cover airfare and hotels and everything. Because again, I was fresh out of college. I didn't have a job yet. No way would I have been able to travel across the country for a stamp show. And without that very formative experience, they probably wouldn't have kept me so interested in the hobby. So it's a wonderful program that I can't speak highly enough of.
That's impressive.
So Ken, we should ask our friends in the collecting world to pay for us to go places.
We should. We definitely should.
Anyway, that's food for thought.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say I was going to ask for your side as well. So go ahead.
So we didn't actually meet until 2018, right? 2017 in Monaco. The part of that initiative there, a man named Patrick Macellis pays for some specific young philatelists as well to go attend a very prestigious stamp show in Monaco called Monaco Phil. So Charles and I actually met for the first time in Monaco in 2017 and kept in touch since then. And then when the pandemic hit, we kind of reached out to each other. And
Michael's being too humble. I was in the car driving to look at a stamp collection, and I get a Facebook message from Mike. We'd met a couple of times. He'd come by my office for lunch. We knew each other, and we're friendly with each other. But I get a Facebook message from Michael. Hey, can I give you a call? So I send him my cell phone number as I'm driving. And he calls and he pitches this idea for a podcast. And I said, that sounds good to me. I didn't want to let on that I'd never actually listened to a podcast before. I didn't really know what they were. I was like, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. Because it's the pandemic. You're just looking for things to do. You're looking for ways to pass the time. I wasn't going into the office every day. So again, it was not a joint idea. I want to be very clear. This was Michael, and I'm just along for the ride. So please don't be so humble, Michael.
I love that you admitted that you didn't know what a podcast was.
I immediately Googled how do you listen to pod? I didn't realize there was like an Apple application. I'd never noticed the app before. So yeah, I very quickly briefed myself on podcasts, and then I wrote him back, and I was like, "Hey, I'm thinking more about this pod." And then I was like an expert on podcasts. I listened to like an hour's worth, and I was like, I had all these ideas. But no, all credit goes to Michael for the idea.
That's the advantage of texting, because you're like, "Yeah, I know. What the hell is he talking?"
Exactly. Yeah. I was like trying to impress him with like podcast knowledge, but yes, that was how it started. It was, I'd been going to shows. Michael, you think you were just starting to look to go to more shows right as all of this broke out, which was unfortunate. And it just gave us a chance to connect with people we hadn't seen in a while. We have Michael and I have a lot of mutual friends in the hobby, and I think a lot of it was we just missed some of these people and thought, let's touch base with them. But also to track down new people who maybe live on the other side of the planet or have a job where we don't really interact with them. Because we didn't want it to be, and I think we both agreed on this early on, that we didn't want it to be just stamp collectors and just people that we were used to seeing at stamp shows. We wanted to, attract a more diverse, people who are sort of stamp adjacent. So we spoke to, one of the PR spokesmen for the USPS, and we've spoken to college professors who use the mail in their teaching. One of them uses the mail to teach American literature. How did literature and mail interact? They're very sort of offbeats, maybe not the right word, but interesting approaches to the hobby that Michael and I, we sort of get blinders on. I think we're so involved in the hobby on such a regular basis, and it was fun to get to hear all these differing viewpoints and perspectives. People who you might not think are collectors, or all sorts of different things. So that was sort of the genesis of it. Was let's just hop on Zoom and talk to people when we can't go anywhere.
That's cool, and I love like the thought process behind it, like meeting people. Since Kent and I started this show, and to be honest, we're only on episode 31, I think. So yeah, 31. We didn't know 3/4 of the people until we started reaching out. Like we wouldn't have known name. I knew of name, but not as well as we got closer because of the show. And I wouldn't have known Dennis, who's watching right now, and a few other people. So we've expanded our knowledge base substantially, right? And at the same time, we've gained a serious number of friends, which is also
cool. Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Well, I was going to say, Michael and I go to a stamp show, and it's fun to meet like the people who comment on YouTube, and they come up to we actually interviewed a guy in San Francisco who had been commenting on all of our videos, and we saw him, and we were like, "Will you talk? Can you come on for it?" So it's fun to have that sort of interaction. And I'll also say that again, I knew Michael, I liked Michael, we were friends, I would say. But this has really brought us together as well, and it's been, Michael and his wife Kaylee have become, two of my closest friends through this podcast. So that's been another fun element to it as well. I don't think Michael and I would have been forced to talk to each other as much as we have if we weren't involved in a project like this, and that's been a lot of fun.
It's actually, my wife is kind of concerned because I get giddy with talking to all my collectible friends, and my friends are all over the world. And it's like, "What are you doing?" "I'm going to go talk to my buddy Darcy out west. I got to go. It's like, what is wrong with you? And I tell her, I'm your safest husband in the world. I don't leave the house. I just need a phone, the internet, and looking up cards and talking to my friends. That's all I need. So when you started a show and channel, the two of you wanted to try and get guests for your show. To kind of tell us, like, what did people feel like when you reached out to them and said, "You want to be our guest?" Like, were they flattered? Were they unsure? Were they like, "Who are these two crackerjacks? What are these guys doing?"
Yeah, so we reached out to people we knew. We started with Alex, who kind of put us together, and then we reached out to people that we'd met before, and they were incredibly supportive. We got nothing but a ton of support from the people who didn't really understand what it was we were doing, didn't understand what we were trying to accomplish. But they, we owe kind of everything to them because they were the ones that started it. And they were such interesting people that they got people kind of hooked on the idea as well.
I'm sure you guys have experienced the same thing where once you have 10, 20 episodes, it's really easy to write someone and say, "Here's what we do." It's true. Laid out. But yeah, those first couple of emails because Michael and I hadn't even really formulated what we wanted it to. We were like, "Yeah, we're just going to talk for 30 minutes, an hour. We don't, however long the conversation goes." So, those first couple of people who joined us without knowing what we were doing, that was really very touching in a way that
Mhm.
they were just willing to say yes to us, even though we were making it up as we went along. So, and again, then once you get a couple under your belt, you sort of, I think, get a bit more confidence, and you have a body of work to show, and it becomes less awkward to cold call people.
Yeah, it's also I have a whole new respect for journalists and researchers who do this professionally. It's
Mhm.
not easy to get up there. And the first show, and we'll talk about this later, but the first couple of shows, I'm pretty sure I sound like a bumbling idiot trying to figure out, fumbling over my questions and trying to figure out what's going on. But now I feel definitely more comfortable and definitely reaching out to people. And Kent does most of the reaching out, but it's easier, way easier now you have 31 shows in, right? And for you, I think it's 67?
67.
Yeah, we just celebrated our 1 year anniversary a couple of weeks ago. So we've had a couple of extra episodes mixed in. So yeah, we just celebrated a year recently, which simultaneously feels like we've been doing this for 10 years.
Wait till you are 10 years from now, and you'll be like, you'll be like, wow, I sound way different. So the one thing that's fairly obvious is both of you are very young. Kent and I are at that point where midlife crisis is either setting in or coming very soon or has passed us and we haven't seen it.
It's funny, in stamp collecting, you guys would be the next youngest after Michael.
Yeah,
exactly. And the Grecian formula in my beard. And it's funny because I watched one of your YouTube shows and I'm watching through and I'm like, there's a lot of older guys in that hobby. Yeah. So it's good to see younger people because all collectibles in general, forget trading cards or whatever it may be, in order for the collective hobbies to grow, you need to bring in people who are younger to enjoy it. So the fact that you two are both young, that helps the game plan overall. So like I said, we mentioned you're young, and you talked about stamp collecting as an older person's hobby. How do you use your medium to make sure you educate younger people to come in or get more younger people to come in to kind of grow the hobby from that, the podcasting and your angle? I'll start with you, Charles.
So I think that stamp collecting is unique in a way because baseball cards are always going to be cool to kids. Kids are always going to love baseball cards. Coins you're always going to use. Everyone's going to know what a coin is. But with stamps, I feel like for much of the hobby's history, your early exposure to stamps was using them, was licking them and sticking them on an envelope, and that sort of gave people a familiarity with them from a very young age. So when it came time to collect something, it was natural because you'd been looking at stamps and tasting stamps and using stamps on a very regular basis. They're not, to most people, I would say they're not inherently as fun as a baseball card. When you get like a Mike Trout card, that's more fun than a stamp with the Statue of Liberty on it. So I think that's one of the biggest problems facing the hobby right now is you don't have that initial exposure. People today don't know even what a stamp costs because now they're forever stamps and it changes all the time with Congress. So I think that lack of early exposure is one of the biggest things we have to overcome. But Michael and I have talked about this youth fellowship. We are huge supporters of this program. We're actually planning on hopefully sponsoring a youth fellow next year. I think that programs like that, a lot of kids are interested in collecting stuff. People are forever, or whether hobbies are getting older or whatnot, they're going to be born with that gene. They're going to have a natural inclination to collect, and I think it's really about and then likewise, there's always going to be people who have no interest in collecting. There's people who you couldn't turn into a stamp collector or a card collector, no matter how much you try. Yeah. So I think it's about identifying sort of the high potential youths and providing them with the resources that they need to be able to fully explore the hobby. So for, I think that, a lot of teachers try to incorporate stamps into their lesson plans, or at a stamp show, they'll have like Michael said, a youth corner where people, kids can fill a bucket with stamps and take it home. But I think the more important thing, rather than just casting a wide net and trying to turn everyone into a stamp collector, what Michael and I are trying to do whenever we meet a young person who shows that, the spark has to be there naturally, and it's up to the hobby to provide the kindling to allow it to. But I'm not sure you can create a stamp collector in a test tube necessarily. There has to be some natural inclination. So again, that's where Michael and I sort of come in, and hopefully people see us and realize that it's not just a bunch of old guys, and you can be young and successful and have a great time in the hobby, no matter what age or gender or whatnot. Stamp collecting has a reputation, I would say, that's a bit unfortunate. That it's an old, stodgy, not a cool hobby by any means. When I tell people what I do for a living, I get laughs more often than not. I've embraced that. I totally get that, but I hope Michael and I can sort of change that perception a little bit.
For sure. Yeah. So go ahead, Michael. Give your perspective.
No, I mean that raises some incredible points. I mean, thinking some of the greatest philatelists that we know came into the hobby specifically because they received mail that they thought was interesting. Not the mail itself, but Wade Sadi, someone we interviewed very early on, told us that he was brought into the hobby specifically because he kept receiving envelopes with the Liberty series on it. So,
which was a series of stamps in the 1950s and 60s that's very popular amongst collectors.
Yeah. So that's what brought him into the hobby, and now he's one of the most prominent, successful professional philatelists of our time. It's weird to say, but he is, and that's what brought him in. And then you see countries like Iceland who get rid of stamps entirely. So what you think of, they're not issuing stamps anymore. So how is that medium for bringing in new collectors in Iceland is completely out the window?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how big this news story was outside of the stamp world, but Iceland stopped issuing new postage stamps. Iceland said we're losing money on stamps. Everything's going to be printed meters and like the Pitney Bowes meters and everything. So Iceland is a stamp-free country these days.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really weird. Okay.
It sounds kind of funny, but stamp-free world. I get what you're saying. But there's a couple of things you both touched on. So one is, so a lot of people focus on kind of the wrong thing. Like, we need the youth in the hobby. You need the youth in the hobby, but you need the desire needs to be there. There needs to be a kind of understanding what the mentality of a collector. A collecting mentality is a bit of a OCD, right? You have a little bit of that, and you push it into the direction of either stamp collecting or trading cards. The other thing that we try to do on this show is show, there are a lot of prominent women who collect trading cards. So it's not just a men's job to collect cards. And our job as men is to kind of show that it isn't just all men. There's women in this hobby too. They deserve equal treatment and respect. And you guys are doing that from a youth perspective and showing, different diversities in that point of view, right? So the inclusive nature. So you have that idea, we have that idea, and collectively, pardon the pun, we'll do that together as a group as we continue to do what we do best on podcasts and whatnot. I'm glad to hear you guys talk about that because that's important. I think a lot of people look at I just want to make a quick buck and get out, but you got to have more people spending those quick bucks to keep it alive, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, stamp collecting has this image of being, not going to lie, a bunch of old white guys at a stamp show. And I hope that our guests have done some small part to disprove that mentality.
And they will. You just need to, the advent of, I'm going to call it a positive benefit of COVID, it forced us all to go online and expand the horizons and see the world for what it is and who it can be. So, we wouldn't have met people. We wouldn't have been able to impart our nature on people. These videos are forever. They're always going to live on YouTube, right? Even long after we're gone, YouTube's still going to be there, and they're going to find this video. Whenever you have children or you get married, your kids are going to be like, "What did Daddy do? Oh, let's go tell he's on YouTube. Let's check this out." Right? It's like a ancestry.ca kind of thing. It's like you get to see your legacy, and you're doing an important service for your hobby. So I thank you for that.
We're having fun. We're trying to give back. We've had so many people who are generous to us, who have supported us.
Yeah.
When my first stamp show, I thought I knew a lot more than I did, and I sort of went in, thinking, and the people who took time, and Michael will tell you the same thing. The people who spent the time with us and sat down with us and explained things, even though we were nothing really. We've had a lot of very generous people impact our lives, and if we can provide a similar role to just a couple of people, everything we do is worth it.
Yeah, exactly.
So go ahead, Kent. I just realized we're at 37 minutes. We haven't even gotten through 1/10 of our questions. So this is how good a good conversation goes. So go ahead, Kent.
Gentlemen, comparatively speaking, if you had to compare episode number 1 to the very first, from the very first to the latest episode, which is number 67, how do you both feel after the completion of episode number 1, and what have you both learned along the way to your latest episode?
Michael?
I mean, feeling very different. I remember specifically after episode 1 thinking that was pretty good. I'm not sure.
I thought, yeah, we nailed it. Like,
Yeah.
Good answer.
In my mind, it sounded just like the podcasts that I was listening to. Like
Yeah,
NPR produced podcast. I was like, that's what Michael and I just did. I think we've really learned a lot about the medium. We've incorporated more show and tell. People will share their screen and give us a peek into their collection or their jobs. I think we've really and the other thing that we've been able to do is we've done episodes where we're in person. Which is as much fun as it is to hop on Zoom with someone. I've gone up to Michael's office and he came down to New York, and we've had some great experiences and at stamp shows. And I think that's one way that it's grown as well. We were sort of, because of COVID, we were locked into a routine.
Right.
Log on, you talk to someone, we record our little intro and outro. I want to give a shout out to Michael's sister, Claire, who does all of the editing and makes our episodes sound a lot better than they have any business sounding. But I think that we've really figured out how to utilize the podcast medium in a much better way, where it's not just log on, log off. It's I think we're trying to just mix things up a little bit.
When we started with episode 1, we really had no plans to do any in-person, go to shows, view stamps, view collections, break down collections, interview people in person. We didn't have any plans for that. We just thought, we'll log on to Zoom, we'll do this. And we didn't know we knew we wanted to do something, but we didn't really have a, long-term goal. And now I think we really do. We have, we're planning episodes out for November, December, where we're visiting people at their actual houses. We're talking to them about their collections. It's the feeling is a lot different from episode 1 to episode 67 to now, where we're at a stamp show talking to actual collectors, just walking around with a mic. It feels a lot different than my list of questions that I started off with.
To be quite honest, and I tell Clint this all the time, I wish I could burn episode 1 because I don't think it sounded good at all.
I don't think I've actually gone back and listened to episode 1 since we did it. To be honest.
I have. I've gone back, and it's like a memory. Like, don't do this. Don't ever do that.
For me, it is still that perfect piece of podcasting that I was, and it'll always be that way in my brain.
Yeah, because our guest was someone we hold so near and dear to ourselves. So, and he's an incredible speaker. And he nailed it. So we didn't even need to be there.
Awesome. Yeah, our first guest was a very prominent figure in our trading card hobby. His name is Billy Celio. He did us a huge favor. He didn't have to. He helped us out and was our first guest. Poor guy sat through 2.5 hours of us asking questions.
It was like 3.5 hours.
It's a 3.5 hours, and it was about 3 hours too long. It's like, so we've learned since then that we need to keep it to about an hour and a bit, hour and a half max. Because after about an hour and a half, your brain just starts to melt. It's just like you just can't keep it together. Sorry, Ken, go ahead, buddy.
No worries. So me and we particularly love this quote that you often quote, Michael, and it's by Dr. Shell Gans about getting new people into the hobby. And her quote was, "If we want to bring in more philatelists, we have to stop talking to only collectors." What is it about this simply a powerful sentence that resonates with the both of you?
So with me, it was the context meant a lot, because at the moment when she said it, she was talking about building exhibits for the Smithsonian National Postal Museum. So she was talking about, because that's what she used to be curator of the Smithsonian National Postal Museum. So she was talking about building exhibits that were tailored not only to collectors, but to people walking in off the street, to try and bring them in and show them that postal history can be interesting, stamps can be interesting, but that you can learn history through stamps. So it meant a lot to me as a quote, specifically because she was talking about, we need to, it's about exposure. It's not just about we need to target these people and bring them into the hobby, grab them in by the collar, and just show them, hey, collect stamps. It's showing people that it's interesting, and then the people who have that collecting gene, like Charles had mentioned, will get hooked. So it was you need to just stop advertising to only people who already collect this material and show the people who don't that there's things that they may be interested in that they haven't experienced yet.
And a lot of people will collect things just related to their profession or related to the town where they were born. And yeah, you don't have to be a stamp collector in sort of the traditional sense, but I think Cheryl's spot on about that, because a lot of you just think it's you lick a little hinge and stick it on the back of the stamp, and then you put the stamp in your album, and you just try and fill in every gap, and that's that. And that's such a small segment of stamp collecting. And Michael mentioned Cheryl worked for the National Postal Museum. They do great things. They've got an exhibit opening up, I want to say early next year, April or so, that's about baseball and stamp collecting.
Oh.
They've got items on loan from the Museum of American History. They've got items on loan from Cooperstown. And it's sort of telling the intertwined stories of baseball and stamps and how they've intersected throughout the years. And that's how you interest people. You don't stick a stamp album in their hands and force them to fill in all the gaps. You almost have to, I hate using the word trick, but you have to get people to be stamp collectors without them
knowing.
It's like the image of stamp collecting is very isolated and boring to an extent. But there's so many other ways to go about the hobby, and I think that's what Cheryl, through her career and her various roles, has done better than just about anyone.
It's like show me I'm stamp collecting without showing me I'm stamp collecting. It's like that TikTok.
100%. Yes. Even my mother never collected stamps in her life, and she went to a couple of shows with me, and she started collecting cats on stamps, just domestic.
Oh, really?
And now she's got hundreds of stamps, and I go to a stamp show, and she's like, "Hey, can you track down these stamps from Poland that have cats on them?" And she's getting into it. Doesn't necessarily care about stamps per se, but she loves. Some of them are silly, and some of them are really awkward photos of cats, and some of them are just beautiful engravings of cats, and she can appreciate it because of her love of cats. It has nothing to do with the fact that they're stamps, really. And I think that's a really important way of getting people involved.
Yeah. Topical collecting like that, cats on stamps, is a massive part of philately, that they have societies not only to embrace all topical collecting, but the Cats on Stamp Society, things like that. And they have exhibits as well, specific exhibits for topical collecting. And it's massive in the hobby. It's a huge demographic.
So one thing I will say is, the language that you're using to describe your hobby, it's very intellectual, right? So you're using topical and language like that. That's something that's a bit different than our subculture. Our subculture or hobby culture is riddled in idioms and things that people don't understand unless you're in the hobby. So like when you talk about you're very elegant in how you explain some of the things, and it does sound elegant. For example, you're going to Monaco, like, to go to a show. Like, we're going to some backwoods town flea market.
Oh, trust me, there's plenty of that in stamps too.
Yeah, I'm sure. But it's interesting to hear just the dichotomy of language used. So that's also I play off and learn stuff like that as well. Mind you, in every one of our hobbies, there's the nice guys, the sleaze bags, and everyone else. So we deal with those as well. But I appreciate how you guys are explaining it. So I want to thank you for that.
So if you enjoyed that first 47 and a half minutes, click on the links below. Again, please go check out Cardboard Culture. We love what these guys are doing. We have become big fans of them since they reached out to us. So again, if you want to listen to the rest of our interview or any of their other great conversations, please go check that out. But in the meantime, we are Conversations with Philatelists. I don't think that we're going to give up this idea we had of reaching out to other hobbies. I hope there's a couple of podcasts that I really want to reach out to and hopefully collaborate with at some point.
Yeah, there's a couple that have already said yes to us, different antiquing podcasts that we're looking to collaborate with as well, and kind of just branch out from traditional philately, but still with the directive of
we've all got the same disease.
Yeah.
So no, that'll be a lot of fun. But yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation last night with these guys, and look forward to keeping in touch with them moving forward as well.
Yeah, absolutely. See you guys on the live stream.
Sounds good.
All right.